Good evening. Representative Elijah Cummings is a Democrat from Baltimore. He's a personal friend of ATU and mine, and we are honored to have him back here to speak here at our conference here. Congressman Cummings, as it was stipulated earlier, is a senior member of the House Transportation Committee, where he sits on the subcommittee in Highway and Transit. He is someone that Local 1300 has been able to call upon for many years to support in protecting workers' rights throughout his career, and he has been a leading advocate for working families on issues such as affordable health care, education, and provisions and safe and affordable public transportation. Congressman Cummings is an institution in Baltimore, where he was recently elected to his 9th term by more than 75% of the votes. He gets results for the people of our city, and his door has always been open to us and all. And I have never met a man more committed, more dedicated, more determined in the work for his constituents and transportation than Congressman Cummings. So on behalf of the more than 3,000 workers of the Maryland Transit Administration, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you my friend, Congressman Elijah Cummings.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is certainly my honor and my privilege to be here this evening. And I want to thank you all for gathering here. This is a very important gathering. And so often we take so much for granted. But I want to take a moment to thank David and to also thank Larry Hanley, your international president, Greg Leroy, Jeff Rosenberg, and all of your other leadership for what you do every day. I'm not going to be long, but it's been a tough week. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, I was in, I have so much on my mind, I have to kind of separate things. We had a situation the other day, David, where the Republican Congress was offering $20 million worth of vouchers for D.C. public school kids. $20 million worth. But at the same time, they were slashing billions from education budgets. Billions from Head Start. Billions from Pell Grants. And I'm going to talk about transportation for a minute, but I want us to understand this is bigger, the Wisconsin deal, Ohio, Indiana, on and on and on. It's not just about an attack on unions, ladies and gentlemen. It is about an attack on our way of life. It is about an effort. It is about an effort to almost destroy the middle class. This is one of the greatest transfers of wealth that will happen in our lifetimes. And one of the reasons why they want to put you out of business is so that they can have free reign to do exactly what has been done, taking money out of your pocketbooks. Matter of fact, don't want you to even have a check to have money in your pocketbook. This is serious business. So I've come here tonight to thank all of you, our advocates, the union for getting together. And what you are doing is so important. So often people, when they are going through difficult times, David, what they do is they turn against each other. Come on now. Part of what is going on today is an effort to have us turn against each other. They want the public employees to fight against the private employees. Come on now. Don't be fooled. The private unions, their day is coming. That day is coming. Because any time you have a situation where people can come together and have power and be able to address issues that are bigger than them and address issues that not only apply to them but apply to other people. As a matter of fact, when I look at something like minimum wage, it doesn't even affect you all. But yet still you have fought for it. Taking away. And so what we're seeing is a chopping away. Chopping away at your pension. Chopping away at your health care benefits. Chopping away at your wages. Chopping away at the hours that you work. Chopping away at all kinds of rights that you might have. Chopping away at the working conditions that you have. I am the ranking member of the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, now known as the ISA Committee, where Mr. ISA sent out a letter to 170 big corporations. And I'm going to get to your issues in a minute. Just hang with me, though. I'm the top Democrat. He's the top Republican. He sent out all these letters to all of these folks saying, tell me about your job-killing regulations so we can get rid of them. You know what we got back? What he got back, because he didn't want to share it with me. What he got back was people saying, get rid of OSHA. Get rid of the OSHA regulation. Get rid of the EPA. That was the biggest one, the EPA regulations. I want you to, the reason why I'm starting the way I'm starting is because I want you to understand that this is bigger than us. They said to me, well, everybody wants a job. What you worried about, Cummings? What you worried about? You know, people would rather have a job than have all these regulations and whatever. What does it matter? I said to them, oh, God. I said to him, when I was a boy, 42 years ago. It's a long time. I was 18. When I was a boy 42 years ago, I used to work at Bethlehem Steel for the summer. And you know how it is when they give you like $7, $8 an hour back then. That was a lot of money. Glad to get it. But one of the things that I shall never forget is when I would go and stay on that yard for 1 hour. When I blew my nose, black came out. It did not matter to me then because I felt like I was invincible. And as an 18-year-old. But then after I got away from there, and I remember the older gentleman that I work with. But we got an orchestra going on here. I lost my thought. The older gentleman. Thank you. Thank you very much. The older gentleman, the ones that I worked with, the ones that encouraged me to go on to college and to be the best that I could be, they died at early ages. Why? Because they were breathing that stuff every day, 8 hours a day, sometimes time and a half for overtime. But they were breathing it and they died. Why am I talking about this? Those regulations, back then, we didn't have to have the mask. But then they said you got to have the mask to stop all that stuff from going up into your nostrils and messing up your lungs. And so what I said to my friends, I said, yeah, people want a job, but they want to come home at the end of the day to see their family, and they don't want to be shipped to their family in a coffin. So, I'm sorry, I'm just fired up. I say to younger people when I speak to high school graduations and college graduations, I say to them, at 60 years old, I have now lived longer than I will live. I tell them, I say that you have something that I wish I had. I say to them, I would give everything that I've got, except my wife and kids, to have what you have. If I could buy it, I'd buy it. And that's that you've got time. The reason why I keep saying this is not about us is because it's not just about us. It is about generations yet unborn.
That's right.
My colleagues the other day said, we want to give a few D.C. children vouchers. And I asked them the question. I said, well, why are you giving them vouchers so they can get through a private school? What you going to do about the public schools? And if you care about, they sat there acting like they were so loving of these children. And they said, oh, we love them so much. We're going to give a few of them vouchers. And I asked them a question. Oh, God. I said, tell me something. If you love them so much, why are you reducing the Pell Grants they'll get when they go to college? If you love them so much, you don't take $845 off of their Pell Grants. I don't know how many of you have kids in college, but $845 ain't no joke for 4 years in a row. By the way, I told my kids, I don't play that 5-year stuff. My daughter said, well, Daddy, you know, now they compute the stuff on 5 years because they give us 5 years. I said, well, that's nice. But my money runs out in 4. After that, you're on your own. Let me get to the matters at hand. What I tried to do is paint a picture for you of the urgency of the moment. I think so often we look at things and we say to ourselves, they crazy. It ain't that bad. They ain't serious. But you know what? And then we mess around and we begin to see our services diminish. You refer somebody to a program. Oh, yeah, girl, you can go to that program for training. They just slashed that. That's not in existence anymore. Oh, you can go to the community college and there's certain opportunities you have there. They don't have enough money to offer those courses anymore. And the next thing you know, you see these things disappearing. And the same things with our transit systems. Transit systems in trouble. Infrastructure in trouble. They're in trouble because we refuse to pay for them. Hang with me. Follow me. You know, it's so easy. See, I know so much stuff. I know that they didn't want me to be. I know they didn't want me to be a congressman. No, because you got to understand where I've come from. My mother and father only had a second grade education. And David knows the story, and they put me my mother and father were former sharecroppers on the land where their foreparents had been slaves. And so they came to Baltimore in the early 1940s for the sole purpose, they had just gotten married, and they came for the sole purpose of making sure their 7 children were properly educated. They were deprived of an education because they had to go and pick the strawberries and cotton and the tobacco. Y'all got the crops. Somebody's familiar. But can I tell you something? They came to Baltimore before we were even born because they had a vision for us. They knew we could not make it in South Carolina. And they put me in special ed. And they said they put me in special ed because they said I talk too much. And I stayed in special ed for 6 years. And I'll never forget, I went to the counselor in the 6th grade. That was supposed to be my big day. I felt like a caged bird. I knew I was smarter than that. I was getting tired of being called dumb and stupid. And I'm telling you this story for a reason. And I went to the counselor and I said, Mr. Counselor, he said, what do you want to be? This was the day that you're supposed to declare what you want to be. I stood up and I said, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be like Perry Mason. And some of you all are too young, but there used to be a show called Perry Mason. Perry Mason was a half-an-hour show. He won every case. Man, about the 27th minute of the series, somebody jumped up in the courtroom and said, I did it. I wanted to be like Perry. Didn't want to be like Mike. Wanted to be like Perry. But the counselor said something to me that day that I will never forget. And I promise, I'm going to talk about transit in a minute, I promise. But y'all need, I want to give you some foundation here. He said something that I will never forget. I said I want to be a lawyer. He looked through my file and I can remember it as if it were happening right now. The pain I felt when he said what he said, I feel it right now. I don't know whether you've ever had something bad to happen to you, and then when you revisit it, it's almost like the pain comes back. I feel it right now as I'm speaking. He went through my file, and he said, you could never be a lawyer. He said, who do you, and he used these words. He said, who do you think you are? And those words have haunted me all my life. Fast forward. I got out of special ed based on those words. I was so mad, so upset, that I said, I'm going to prove him wrong. Now, I know this is going to be incredible to you. Hold on to your seats. But my first client was the counselor. If I had more time, I'd tell you the whole story. But he came to me. He didn't know who I was. He had forgotten all about me. But he came to me one day, and he was looking for a lawyer in the firm. It was only 3 of us. I'd only been practicing law for 3 days, and I was the 3rd lawyer. The other ones were much more experienced. He came. He said, is Jerry there? I said, no. He said, is Ken there? I said, Ken's in court. He said, I need a lawyer. I said, I'm a lawyer. I did not tell him about the 3 days. But I went on to represent him. I won the case. And on the way back from the courthouse, he asked me the question. He said, you act like you know me. I said, I do know you. I said, it is a miraculous thing that God has brought us together again after all these years. He said, what do you mean? I said, you were my counselor. You told me I would never amount to anything. You told me I would never be a lawyer. I could never make it. And I had to ask him the cosmic question. You know I had to ask him the question. First of all, I had to get my money. I got my money. I got that. Yeah, I had to get my money now. Before I asked him the cosmic question, I wanted to make sure I got paid. Yeah. Matter of fact, I ran his butt down to the bank. I didn't want to check. Cash. But I had to ask him the cosmic question, how do you like me now? That's why I say, that's why this is where the passion comes from. People say, well, why do you feel so strongly about these issues? I feel strongly about these issues because I have now lived longer than I will live. I feel as if I have been given a life that maybe is almost a borrowed life. When I look at my life and I think about what I have achieved and what I have accomplished, I feel like my story is one that should have been put in the Bible. And I'm serious. Because it is a miraculous story. But it is a story that could only have happened in America. And it could have only happened if unions existed. You have to understand, my life is filled with union stuff. With my daddy, I told you my mother and daddy came from South Carolina. They came, and the first thing my daddy got was a union card and a union job. My daddy was working for 15 cents a day. 6 days a week. From sun up to sundown. He came to Baltimore and got a raise. $1.15 an hour. Did you hear what I said? From 15 cents a day to $1.15 an hour. Boy, he thought he was rich. But there were other things that I was provided. He was able to get time and a half. That's how we were able to buy our house. The house that my mother still lives in today. We were able to go on vacation because he was able to do overtime. I remember he would gather us together. Sometimes he'd say, Daddy's not going to be around a lot for the next month or two because Daddy has got to work overtime so we can make the vacation money. He was able to have help. We were able to have health care. And ladies and gentlemen, don't let anybody fool you. Don't let them try to fool you about this health care legislation. This health care bill is the most important thing that I have ever done in my legislative life. I had somebody that asked me this summer, when I was running, they said, hey, Elijah, they said, don't you want to apologize to us, your constituents, for voting for that health care bill? I said, sit down. Because you need to hear what I'm going to say. I don't want to shock you. I said, let me tell you something, sir. I've seen so many people die needlessly. I've seen so much pain. I said, every morning I have a friend of mine named Byron. He used to be a city employee. He worked very hard for the city. He became disabled when he found that he had a lump on his leg. He later found out that it was cancerous. And I had watched him blow up and shrink, based upon the just gallons of chemotherapy that had been pushed through his body. I said, and I constantly am reaching into my pocket to give him money because he has to supplement that chemotherapy. And I said, I know you may think it only applies to people in poor areas, but sir, right down the street here in Howard County, just a few months ago, I ran into a man who had a choice. He said, either I have $250,000 in the bank. He said, he said, I have a daughter in medical school. He said, either I can take the $250 and help my daughter through medical school, or I can take the $250 and they guarantee me I'll live maybe 2 years. But I got to use it for medical costs. I said, I can tell you story after story after story. I said, so therefore, let me tell you this. I said, when the day that we had to vote for the bill, the health reform bill, I said I got to the chamber 4 hours early. I said I sat on the front row. I said, you may have seen me. I crossed my legs, and I was determined. And I said, sir, I only had one prayer. I just had one prayer. I kept praying this prayer over and over and over again. I said, God, please don't let me die before I vote for this bill. I said, if it has to be the last thing I do, don't let me die before I vote for this bill. Because I know that there are too many people that are depending upon this. And can I tell you something? I cannot understand. I don't know how many of you all have ever had a relative, or maybe you have gone through cancer treatment or something, some serious ailment. I cannot understand for the life of me how anybody can just say, people, if they ain't got no health care, the hell with them. It's too bad. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to. You got to understand that. And I know that there are people who say that I don't have a pre-existing condition. Well, you just keep on living. If you ain't got one, you will get one. Or you'll be dead. One of the two. So it won't matter if you're dead. You're dead. But you understand what I'm saying? So what do we have to do? We have to do what you are doing here tonight. This is a brilliant idea. Did y'all do this every year? This is brilliant. Remember I said that we have a tendency to turn against each other. When we are in a battle, we need to turn towards each other. And we need to embrace each other. And we need to embrace each other based upon our common interests. You ain't got to like me. But if you're interested in the same thing I'm interested in, let's do this right now and let's do it together. There's an African proverb that said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others together. That's what this is all about. And this is absolutely brilliant. Now, I got to get into some of this policy stuff. So let me tell you what they wrote for me, and then I'm going to... Ladies and gentlemen, I'm reminded that what former U.S. Secretary of Transportation Rodney Slater has observed. He said transportation is about more than concrete and asphalt and steel. It's about meeting the needs of the American people, connecting communities, and providing economic opportunities to places and people that have not fully benefited from our economic expansion. Now more than ever, we must keep this in mind. The choices we make in formulating transportation policy have a major impact on our neighborhoods, on whether our communities become viable, and on whether folks have the mobility that will enable them to move ahead in their lives and create opportunities for their children. Let's stop right there. You know, the old preachers, they read a little scripture. Then they say, let's stop right there. I want to thank all of our transit folk for what you've done for me. I want to thank you for touching my life in more ways than you will ever know. When I think about the fact that my mother used to get on a bus late at night, well, actually early in the morning, and she used to go and do domestic work. But she would not have been able to get there if it were not for a bus. Mother would then come home, take care of her children, and then get on another bus. Y'all know the story. She'd not go and get on another bus and go to the 700 block of West Lexington Street at a little storefront church. She would gather together with other women mainly, and they would sing songs and have testimony service. Some of y'all don't even know what a testimony service is, but after this is over, y'all who do know what testimony service is, let them know what it is. And then my mother would get back on a bus. You know, the reason why I'm talking slow is because I'm just remembering as a little kid tagging along with my mom. She called me her protector. But she'd get on the bus, and she would go and she would take care of somebody who was sick at the church. Sometimes they had cancer, sometimes they had ailments, sometimes they were just old and fragile. But she would clean their houses and then get back on the bus. She'd come home, she'd prepare her kids for the next day, soak her feet in Epsom salt. The next morning she'd get back up again at about 4:30 and start all over again. I thank you for being the transportation mode that she used. I thank you for something else. I thank you for me, for myself. Remember I told you that the unions opened the door for us to buy a house? Well, when we bought the house, the high school I wanted to go to was, my goodness, I mean, it was like about 10 miles away, I guess, maybe a little further. But it was a bus that would pick me up. There was a bus driver named Mr. Harris. I used to hate to miss his bus. If I missed his bus, I felt like I had missed my morning coffee. Because Mr. Harris would always have an encouraging word. He was a constant in my life. He would remind me of how important school was. I'd sit right next to him, right behind him, and I'd talk to him. You know, I think when I hear all of this bashing of public employees, it hurts my heart because, all of us have an important job. All of us play a role. All of us are significant. All of us have things that we contribute to our society. But then we hear this bashing. And so I wanted to stop there and pause to say thank you for adding so much to my life. But thank you for being the psychiatrist. Some of y'all some jackleg psychiatrists. Amen. Thank you for being the lawyers. Thank you for being the advisors. Thank you for being the referral agent and refer you to everybody because y'all know everybody. Thank you for being the encouragers. Thank you for being the ones that are constant in so many people's lives. And I don't even think the people in the transit industry really realize the role that you play in people's lives. And so I thank you. So anyway, going on with my speech, I just wanted to make sure that I said that. And so I thank you for all. You can give me a clap. That's fine. So we have a hard fight ahead of us, very hard, and it will take combined efforts like the efforts we have tonight. As you know, even as ridership on transit systems has increased, costs have increased, and state budgets, which continue to suffer the consequences of our economic crisis, have been slashed. According to data released by the American Public Transportation Association, in 2010, since January 1, 2009, nearly 60% of public transit systems have been forced to raise fares, cut service, or both. And many systems that have thus far avoided such actions are nearing the point where they will have to begin doing so shortly. Families and children are being stranded by eliminated routes, reduced hours, and higher fares. Let's stop right there. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people don't understand what it is how people are affected when a fare goes up. Hello. You got to remember 1/3 of the members of Congress are millionaires. I'm not one of them, but 1/3 of them are millionaires. And a lot of people don't realize that when somebody has, like, say somebody like on Social Security or whatever, has an increase of, it could be $1. It throws their whole budget off. But when you're not used to that, when you can't relate to that, then there's a problem. And that's why it's so important that you all be the advocates and that you all, the transit folk, combine with the advocates, because you all have to be the witnesses to make people realize how important keeping these fares low is. It is so important. As a matter of fact, getting back and forth to work, very important. Being able to get to church, very important. Having routes where people they don't have to walk so far to get to a bus route, very important. Why? Because for several reasons, but one of the main reasons is safety. One of the main reasons is some people don't have as much mobility as other people. And so they need to be, did I get an amen over there? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Amen back at you. So thank you. They don't have as much mobility. And we have to be sensitive to that. And you are the ones, I'm not going to be long, I promise. I see them fidgeting over there. You all right? Huh? No, see, wait a minute, hold on. See, y'all got to stay still, because what happens in my neighborhood, I live in the inner city of Baltimore. I live in the neighborhood where the wire is filmed. And if a fly moves, you see it. So I'm checking y'all out. I don't know. I got my eye on you. You all right? All right. Sadly, however, as challenging as these things are now, the House majority would simply shut many of these systems down. And you got to understand that. They will shut them down. They will shut them down to give tax cuts to the richest of the rich. You got to understand that. And they have no shame. And I got to say this. I got to say this. Pull your feet in, because I may step on your toes. You know, sometimes I read these surveys that say that the unions support the Democrats, but the membership don't. The reason why I raise this is because, let me tell you something, the Republicans ain't your friend. They ain't your friend. They will take money. They will take food out of a baby's mouth. Literally. They will cut off your child's education opportunities. Today, I had legislation that we put in last year. It was for $3 billion. They cut it last year down to $1 billion just to help people who were out of a job through no fault of their own and were struggling with their mortgage payments, to give them some bridge loan money until, not give them, but loan them some bridge loan money until they could get a job. They killed that today. They ain't your friend. Oh, I'll go along with the union, but me and my house, we going to vote for the Republicans. Yeah, well, the Republicans will vote you out of a job, too. And I hate to tell you all that, but I just want you to know it, because I get tired of it. That I look at these polls and they say, oh, yes, your union's for the Democrats, but union members individually and their families are for the Republicans. So anyway, I just had to stick that in. Sorry. Pull your feet in. A few weeks ago, the House considered H.R. 1, the proposed continuing resolution offered by the majority to fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year. The bill, which passed the House, would make devastating cuts in transportation programs, including, for example, cutting $150 million in supports provided by the federal government to the Washington Metro, and cutting hundreds of millions from the FTA's capital investment grants, better known as New Starts. You know what that also means? Jobs. This bill is the clearest illustration of the new House majority's priority, which is simply to cut federal expenditures regardless of the purpose for which they are made and regardless of the impact on our economy, our future, or our citizens. We must fight these cuts. We must fight to ensure the doors of the bus and the subway and the light rail stay open so that our citizens can ride ahead to a better future. That's what this is all about. One way we can help keep the wheels turning is to allow transit systems to use some of the federal funding they receive, which is currently directed towards capital purposes, to be used for operating expenses. Transit systems... Well, y'all make me feel like President Obama. You get the claps. Yeah, I appreciate that. Transit systems located in cities with populations less than 200,000 have this option. And the 2009 supplemental spending bill allowed up to 10% of the transit formula funds provided by the Recovery Act to be used for operating purposes by any transit system. According to the Public Transportation Association, as of 2010, more than half of the public transportation systems had indeed flexed funds from capital to operating expenses under the opportunities provided for such transfers. Legislation was introduced in the last Congress to give transit systems permanent opportunities to flex funds under certain circumstances. I was a co-sponsor of that legislation authored by my good friend and colleague, Congressman Russ Carnahan. Further, the budget for fiscal year 2012 proposed by President Obama would create a new mechanism to allow any transit system to flex funding in a temporary, targeted way. I'm hopeful that these proposals will receive the serious consideration they deserve. I note, however, that while this option is needed to enable systems to weather the economic storms, the continued long-term diversion of capital funds to operating expenses will only increase maintenance needs and costs down the line. Put simply, we can either pay now or we can pay later. I believe that we must choose to make smart, targeted investments in public transportation right now. That said, it may not be surprising to you to hear that there are many challenges to our effort. Transit systems receive significant federal assistance, primarily, as we already discussed, in the form of capital funding. Such funding is provided in the multi-year transportation authorizations. The most recent authorization, the Safe TLU bill, was enacted in 2005 and expired in 2009. It provided a combined total of $286 billion in funding over its authorization years for highways and transit systems. Over the last year and a half, Congress has not yet been able to enact a new authorization to replace the expired bill. Last Congress, under the leadership of Congressman Jim Obasar, who got defeated, by the way, who was then the chairman of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, we developed plans for a $500 billion authorization that would have significantly expanded investments in transit. Unfortunately, we were unable to reach agreement on how to generate the revenues necessary. You understand that revenue problem? Y'all understand that? You understand that the gas tax is our main source, and gas is taxed per gallon. And with people saving money with us having more efficient cars, that means that people are using less gas, which means there's more money coming in to the coffers. Nobody wants to raise taxes, especially in this economic time. Don't want to raise taxes on people with regard to their cars because people got to get to work and whatever. Don't want to raise taxes on the gas. And so we're in a little bit of dilemma as to how we come up with those funds. So the president has expressed his opposition to a gas tax increase. The House majority opposes any new revenues of any kind. And frankly, at a time when gas prices are rising, it's difficult for any member to vote for it. Without such revenues, however, even if we could reach agreement on policy questions that must be answered to enact a new authorization, the expenditures made by the authorization would be limited to the level of revenue generated by the current tax levels. That's at $286 billion, which is the same that we had before, or less if revenues continue to remain strained. I know that $286 billion sounds like a lot of money. I know it does, but it's not. And keep in mind that only a portion of that funding comes to public transit systems. In place of a new authorization, we have repeatedly enacted a series of short-term extensions that have kept the Safe TLU bill in place. What we need now is a recommitment to the value of transit and to the value of investing in our nation's infrastructure. And that means to cut to the bottom line that we must unite in support of generating revenues needed to support these investments. President Obama has shown bold leadership by championing investments in high-speed rail. At the same time, we also need to invest in our existing local transit systems, and this is where you all come in. You have the opportunity to unite and undertake a joint effort to fight for the value of investing in public transit. I encourage you to raise this issue to every member of Congress. Now, let me put a pin right there. let me tell you what really upsets me. You know something that upsets me? When y'all come to the Hill and you come to visit me, you ain't got to visit me. I'm already on your side. No, I'm serious. If y'all want, I know y'all say, well, we want to come to Congressman and say thank you. You know what we have a tendency to do? We have a tendency to go places where we feel comfortable. So y'all feel comfortable with me. You say, Elijah's on our side. Let's go and chat with Elijah. Don't come to me. Just wave. Say, thank you. You know why? You know what I want you to do? I want you to go down the hall to the Republican who nullifies my vote. Talk to him. Don't talk to me. I mean, I'm serious about that. Ask him why you cutting the transit money. What's going on, man? What's up with that? And don't let them double. Oh, God. You must go in with your facts, because they'll snow you now. Oh, I'm on your side. I'm with you. And you up there, yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Congressman. We're gonna give you a plaque. We love you. And he messing over you, taking away your money. Ladies and gentlemen, Democrats need to hear your message so they understand what we are fighting for too. And it is urgent. Sadly, however, in the House at least, we do not control the agenda. You got to understand it. You understand that, right? Everybody, my constituents ask me, say, well, Cummings, what's such a big deal about controlling the House, controlling the Senate? They who controls the House or the Senate controls the agenda. Do y'all understand that? When we went from the majority to the minority, there's a flip. Like, for example, in my committee, when we were in the majority, we had 80 employees. When you go to the majority, you have 40. You follow what I'm saying? If the majority doesn't want to vote on something, it never even gets on the agenda. Hello? Doesn't even get on the agenda. That's why it's so important to control the House. We cannot schedule a single bill for consideration, even if every single Democrat votes against a measure. We cannot stop its passage, even if the other side is united. Okay. Therefore, it is urgent that you reach across the aisle and ensure that the new members of Congress understand your concerns and understand the impact of the cuts they propose. The need to hear from you and from their constituents. Oh, God. I'm finished. But hold on. You know what? I'm not even going to read anymore. Because it just hit me. You know, I started off this speech talking about the cuts. And I want you to summarize, if you had to summarize what I've said, I want you to summarize it this way. I see my sister taking notes. You go ahead and write on. But write this down. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a moral issue. You hear what I'm saying? This is a moral issue. I'm going to take 5 minutes and then I'm going to go. It really pains me when I think about these cuts. And I'm reminded of a little girl named Nakia. A few years ago when we were celebrating Brown versus Board of Education, this little girl was a middle school student at the John P. Sousa School. And her class had come to Congress to speak to the Congress, celebrating Brown versus Board. For some reason, I see this little girl You ever had somebody that did something and they just stayed in your mind? It's like God had just planted them in your mind just to mess with you. I mean, just to remind you of what's important, maybe in your own child. But this little girl got up on her tippy toes. She was dressed in a beautiful little white dress. And so she was supposed to give a speech to the congressman. There was about 50 of us. And she says, I am so glad to be here today. I am Nakia Bryant, and I go to the John P. Sousa School. I have something that I want to say to you today. So she had a little speech. I saw her do like this. I said, oh! I got to the front of my chair and I wanted to hear what she said. Because I knew girlfriend was going to tell us something. She threw away her speech at 11 years old. I said, uh-oh. See, the other guy, they didn't understand it, but I understood it because she was like from one of them little girls from my neighborhood. I said, uh-oh, so where's the speech? All right, here we go. She said, and these are the words she said, and I want you to think about what I'm saying. She said, I go to the C.P. Sousa School, and she said 50 years ago, my school was segregated. She said, guess what? Today, my school is segregated. She said, I've seen the pictures. She said, back then, all the students were white. She said, today, all the students are black. Oh, it gets better. She said, every day I go past a library in my school. She said they showed us some pictures the other day of the way our library used to look. She said it was filled with books. And there was a librarian standing in the front smiling. She said today the library room is closed. There are no books. She said the adults told us that they had no money. She said every day I make sure I go to the bathroom, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She said every day I make sure I go to the bathroom before I leave. She said I don't drink any water while I'm at school. She says because I don't want to go into the bathrooms because the doors are open and the toilets are broken. I don't want to do that. And so at the end of the day, I rush home so I can go to the bathroom. She said, ladies and gentlemen, this is 50 years later. She said, you all had your turn. It is our turn. It is our turn. And so the reason why I mentioned that story is, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have any other argument, go to YouTube and see some of the speeches I've made on the floor this week. If you don't have any argument, argue the morals. Argue the morals. I have noticed when I argue the morals, there is no comeback. There's no comeback. I don't play tennis, but you know, when you serve, and you serve an ace, and there's no comeback, you say, go on with your bad self. What I'm saying to you is that we've gotten away from the moral question. And as I told my colleagues this morning, I said, yeah, you'll go into church on Sunday just like I will. And you'll stand up there and you'll sing the hymns. And you'll talk about your love of the Bible. And you'll read Matthew 25. You'll read the same Bible I read. And then what you going to do? You're going to stick out your chest and say, guess what? I made it possible for 30,000 people not to be in their houses this week. Guess what? I made it possible for 200,000 young children on the waiting list for Head Start not to be on there. Guess what? I made it possible for people not to be able to have Pell Grants so they can go to college. Guess what? I cut off all 8 million people from being able to be trained for new jobs. Guess what? I slashed and cut teachers and state budgets. That's what I did. And then you'll say, thank you, Lord, for giving me another day. And then you'll go out and try it all over again. And so I say to you, if you can't think of anything else, if you don't know all the facts, if you don't know all the numbers, if you don't know all the problems, just remember this. Say, brothers and sisters of the Congress of the United States, Congressman Cummings told me to tell you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Congressman Cummings told me to suggest to you that you should want for every child in the United States what you want for your own child. Congressman Cummings said to me, he told me that he sits on the board of the Naval Academy, that he sat on the board on the committee on armed services, that he was a chairman of the Coast Guard subcommittee. But he said something that is embedded in the DNA of my brain. This is y'all talking now. He said that he is concerned about Osama bin Laden. He said he's also concerned about the terrorists. He's concerned about all of these people who want to do us harm. But guess what else he said, Congressman? He said the greatest threat to our national security is our failure to properly educate every single one of our children. That's a threat to our national security. And so when you go out there, go with gusto. Put aside your differences. Some of you may not like white people. Some of you may not like black people. Some of you might like bald-headed people like me. I mean, whatever. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is what you have in common. And as I close, my father, former sharecropper, in 1996, when his son became the congressman, my father made it up the steps of the Capitol. I said, Daddy, do you want to take the elevator? He said, no, I'm just so glad to be here. I'm going to walk up. I want to take my time. So he marched up, sat up in the balcony, and I could see him out of the left eye, and over in the right eye was watching Newt Gingrich. He was about to swear me in, and it just seemed like I could just hear footsteps. Because I remember when I accompanied my father up, he wasn't feeling well that day, but I could hear his footsteps, and he had these heavy footsteps. So he had gotten up there, and he was sitting down, and I was up there getting ready to be sworn in by Newt Gingrich. And then, something happened miraculous. I looked out of the corner of my left eye, and I saw my daddy, for the first time in his life, almost 70 years old, with a tear running down his face. I'd never seen my daddy cry. Newt Gingrich swore me in, and I could hardly wait to get to my daddy. He was such a proud man that I didn't want to say I saw you crying, because I knew that he would never admit it. I said, Daddy, it must be hot in here. I said, you sweating? And my daddy and I were close. But I knew that he was a man who had so much pride. He was a union man. He believed in work. He would dig ditches if he had to. When he was laid off, he would go and pick beans like a slave on a farm in Harford County. And I'd never forget it. And I looked at him. I said, Daddy, is it that hot? He said, no, Dad, no, son. I said, well, what's going on? He said, I'm dropping some tears. And I can feel what I felt right now. I said, why are you crying? I said, I ain't never seen you cry. I said, you that happy because I became a congressman? He said, son, I can't even begin to tell you how happy I am and how proud I am that you made it here today. He said, but that's not why I'm crying. I said, why are you crying? He said, because now I see what I could have been. Now I see what I could have been. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to fight for our future. You got to fight for this. You got to fight. I don't care. Let me tell you. Because if you don't fight, governors like that guy up in Wisconsin and others will try to take your life away from you, and they'll pick us off one by one. That's why unions are so important, because unions don't forget what I said. Oh, God, don't forget what I said. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together with others. You go together with others. You go together with others. Thank you. But I want to leave you with this little footnote. When I think about my father, who died about 10 years ago, there was something, and what you just said reminded me of this. I remember we had one Christmas. I'm just going to take 2 minutes. It was one Christmas that my father had been laid off. And we didn't have, it was one of them sad Christmas. He had already told us we wouldn't get much. And so we came down on Christmas Day. You know, we were little kids. I must have been 7 years old. It was the saddest and the greatest Christmas I ever had at the same time. And I came down, and my father was sitting under the Christmas tree. It was a little scraggly tree. It was probably the last one that they saw on New Year's Eve. Sad-looking tree. Saddest tree I ever saw. But my father said something, Mr. President, that I hope that all of us will remember when we're dealing with our kids, when we're dealing with our friends, but particularly with our children. He said, you won't understand this now, son. I don't have the skates, and I don't have a bike for you. He said, but by and by, you'll understand this. He said, you will understand that my presence in your life is presence enough. I will never forget that. And your presence in my life, your presence in my life is presence enough.